the nexus of my competitive, the pinnacle of my career was the state swimming championship 400-yard freestyle against Pete Adams. Because Pete represented everything I'd been chasing, everything I admired and respected, and yet the one thing I needed to defeat. You understand? I mean, as a competitor, you can appreciate that this was it. And once I crossed that threshold, it was sort of like, okay, I've done that. That's a threshold that few people get to really experience on such a profound level. Because here it was, the natatorium at Patton Pool, a huge shell, crowded people, television, newspapers. It was front page. I mean, there was never a fervor in the history of high school swimming that was stirred up by those few years. And I was part of it. And certainly after that particular event, because it was such a big burst, and the way that it unfolded, I don't know if you've read accounts of that event or not, but a couple of the Detroit Free Press things I remember had me, somebody said, okay, Pete was this huge monster guy. He had just, broken a state record in the 200-yard freestyle at 150.2, which at the time was like lowered the state record by 2.5 seconds or something like that, or a second and a half. And I swam the earlier event in the 200-meter individual medley when Kenny Wiebeck swam an incredible 2:03, which was nationally ranked, if not
that record stood from 63 to 70. That state record. He went 2:03.8, and that state record stood from 1964 until 1970, 6 years.
Easily. And at the time, he probably was like one of the top 5 nationally ranked high school swimmers, I would have to say. So we started out, and I remember the Detroit Free Press guy was reporting it, saying that Peter took off and he just started lunging out, and he opened up a huge lead by the 200-meter point. And the article went on to say, and Webster was trailing behind like an easy swimming dolphin. I found, or porpoise, or whatever he used at the time. And later I read that and really laughed, because they were already using that kind of an association that later I very strongly identified for a variety of reasons. But be that as it may, I had been trained, Heller had trained me in splitting 200 to 200. And that was a relatively new training technique at the time. And so all of my training was set to repeat, which is what the swimmers were doing at the time. If you swim at 1,500 meters, you want to do every 50 at 30 or 30.1 or 29.9 or 30.5. So that was the whole idea. So I went out knowing that I would come back nearly as fast as I went out. So nobody in the house knew that this was what's going on. So here's a big gap, and everyone in Seaholm is going crazy. Oh yeah, we're wiping out Kimball. We're going to win. Look at this. And so the place is all, one side of the stadium is going up, and this is being reported to me because I can only hear when I'm breathing. I turn my head, I'm hearing this big, huge wah, wah, wah. So I know that there's excitement. Gradually, the gap slowly goes together, so that the final turn, we're flipping at the same time. And the whole place is going ape shit for the last 25 yards. And we're neck and neck. I put my head down with like 10 meters, 15 meters to go. I just go for it. And I smashed into the wall 4/10 of a second faster than Pete. For me, I had to do that. There was no denying. There was no, even though in that first dual meet that was on closed circuit TV, Pete and I swam to a dead heat, 400-yard dead heat at 4 minutes and 8/10, fastest he had ever swum by 4 seconds, slightly slower than I had swum before. But again, we were swimming in a different race. The conference finals, where I swam against them again, Heller says, okay, let him go. This isn't the race for you. You're going to let him go. And he went out and just blasted me, and he beat me by a couple of seconds in the 400 yards. That was the conference race before the state finals. He says, we're peaking you. My coach Heller says, we're peaking you for the state finals. This is what we're going to do. And so he timed it as a coach. He tapered me properly. He got me peaked so that I wasn't peaking at the conference finals. I was peaking a few weeks later when we hit the Michigan State finals. And so, you know, I swam 3 seconds faster, almost 3.5 seconds faster than I'd ever swum before. I'd broken the state record of 4 minutes, 3:59.8 in the preliminaries. And Peter had come back and swum a 4-minute flat. So that was the preliminary the night before. And we got to swim the night before the 400. So this whole thing, as I say, from my public persona or the ego, my swimming ego was satisfied to its maximum at that time. You know, you stand up on the blocks, the whole place is giving you standing motivation. I mean, it doesn't, as a performer, it doesn't get any better than that, right? A standing ovation from your audience who are all just, you know, beside themselves at the performance. And Pete too. I mean, Pete was a type of personality, and I learned years later because we were in, you know, we've been woven together, you know, our whole life. You know, years later, I was working in an art gallery as an assistant director of an art gallery in Birmingham, and Peter lived in Pickering, came back to visit the family, and found out that he was an artist. And he was a wood carver and a wood sculptor and a furniture builder and so on and so forth. And we linked right back up. And he confessed to me at the time, he says, you know, I was happy with my performance. He said, I did the best I could. And I knew I did the best I could. So I was cool with that. And I says, you know, I never would have been able to accept that. If I had lost that race, I would have been devastated, you know, beyond anything I could think of.